Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk, lively conversation for all things church transformation. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill Tenney Britton, in our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of the U.S. And I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, author and denominational leader, Dr. Kris Tenney Britton, the area minister of the Northeast area of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Mid-America. Try and say that 3 times fast. Good morning, Kris.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Church Talk Live.
Bill and Kris Tenney Britton here today to talk about probably one of the most controversial episodes that we've ever done. We've sort of avoided this topic for 3 years and just decided we needed to take the plunge. We're going to talk about using Halloween or the Halloween holidays to reach your community. We have this disclaimer to make up front.
Right.
We know that there are a number of churches who have totally said, nope, we're not going to have anything to do with Halloween, and they have lots of reasons for that, and we totally understand. And if you're one of those churches, then part of what we may have to say may be not in line with what your theology is. However, there are things you'll still be able to learn, and so we hope you'll stick with us. This episode is specifically designed for those churches who have decided to if you will, embrace or at least to make the most of the secular holiday, Halloween, in order to reach their community in an effective way. So, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say that hopefully you all know out there that whether you agree or disagree with holidays and different things that go on or different trends that are going on in the United States, some of them are facts. And Halloween is a fact. It comes around every year on October 31st, whether we like it or not. And we in the church have the opportunity to make the most of it. And that's exactly what we want to talk about today.
Well, exactly. And it is a national holiday, whether we want to call it a holiday, which comes from holy days, but whatever. But the reality is it's a holiday that is growing in popularity. In 2010, 63.8% of Americans celebrated Halloween one way or another, and that is an increase over the last several years. We spent $5.8 billion in 2010 for the whole package of Halloween.
Yeah, 1.63 billion of that was on decorations, and my friends, that has doubled since 2005. So in 5 years, the amount we spend on decorations has doubled. Adults between the ages of 25 and 35 spend an average of $60 a year.
$60 each.
Right. Yeah,
not $60 as a whole. Yeah. But I mean, that's the age group that seems to be expanding and really embracing the holiday. It's also, it has just recently overtaken Easter as the biggest candy holiday of the year, which, by the way, means that it totally blows through Christmas. So, just between you and me, in some ways, Halloween's my favorite holiday.
Only because he makes us hand out Reese's peanut butter cups. But all of that aside, the bottom line is there are 3 options for churches that are wanting to maximize their outreach through Halloween. And the first of those, well, I'll just name all 3 of them. Right. How's that? Yeah. There's the trick-or-treat option. There's the trick-or-treat alternative, and then there's the combination of the trick-or-treat option and the trick-or-treat alternative. And, I think there's a 4th option, and that is to miss the opportunity. So, but we're not going to talk about missing opportunity anymore, right? We want to talk about a trick-or-treat option, trick-or-treat alternatives, and then some opportunities that would combine both the trick-or-treating and the alternatives.
And at the end of this program, we're also going to talk about how you can maximize your efforts no matter which option you have, and whether or not you do much in the Halloween holiday anyway, because these are standard tips that you need to make whatever outreach you have as effective as possible.
Well, and I want to really reiterate that we are now running into the season. You know, we're hitting Halloween. Thanksgiving is going to be 3 weeks later, so maybe 4. Right after that, we've got Christmas about 4.5 weeks later as well. So we're just clicking them off every month right now, or less than a month apart. It's going. Then the New Year's upon us. And this is the time, my friends, to get ready, get going, and taking. If you can start now, just imagine where you're going to be by Christmas and into the new year.
Well, exactly. In fact, next week's episode, we're talking about the 2011 Christmas planning. And the reality is, if you're going to do a really big deal for Halloween, it's probably already too late to do a really big deal to get it planned, depending on what you're doing.
All right.
Right.
So
but let's talk about what's there, and you can always
Right.
watch this next year, or remind yourself, or
Okay.
maybe you are. Okay. So let's talk about the trick or treat option, and what we mean by that is if you've decided as a congregation that you want to make the most of the trick or treaters. By the way, there's a diminishing number of trick or treaters. It's on a decline. And there were 41 million went trick-or-treating in 2010 estimated, and that number is down, and it's been going down for about a decade. And there's lots of different reasons why it may be going down, but there's still 41 million of them, probably 40.5 million of them this year going out to trick-or-treat. And so those churches that decided they want to embrace that option, they have a couple of options that we've seen used across the church. And the first one is
trunk or treat. I think this is so cool. It's where people in the church just line up their cars and park them head on, and they fill their trunks with candy, and the kids go from trunk to trunk to trunk to trunk. And in some cases, I've seen dentists in churches add toothbrushes and whatnot at the end. But it's really gaining in popularity. I know more and more of the churches that we're working with, we're seeing that increase.
All right,
and the mall approach.
Well, the mall
Talk to us
approach is
about
another
that.
one, and that is, if you go to the mall, a lot of trick-or-treating goes on there now, and the mall, of course, uses it to boost their sales, which, by the way, why aren't we using it to boost our, I don't want to say sales, but our reach, if you will. Well, you can do similarly, take your trunk or treat and essentially move it into your building, and you could do an open house, and the kids can go from room to room, and you could decorate the room, and there's lots of different ways of doing that. We'll talk about that in the combination section. But the kids can go from room to room or station to station within the building, which of course gets people into your space, not just into your parking lot. And of course, you have to weigh up in your context whether or not you're going to gather more people or significantly less people by having them come into your building. But that is another approach, is you can do this mall approach.
Well, and as you say malls, actually what I was thinking when you mentioned that was that I've seen churches at the malls, and they set up kind of a booth or a kiosk to add to the trick-or-treating.
Right.
So there's that. Now, you mentioned this third one, and I've not heard of this, or at least not the way you're calling it. So tell us about the treasure map.
Well, one of the keys that we're finding why people are not trick-or-treating is because they're not really sure of safe places to go. And so you as a church could advertise that, get members of your congregation who were willing to do trick-or-treating from their home, and develop a treasure map that is given out to people. They can come by the church or they can get it online, however you want to. If you do it either way, you might want to have people register. That's good for follow-up later. But, they get a treasure map, and with addresses or however you want to do it, and they go from these places to place and get these treasures. Now, one thing you may want to consider is for those who participate in the treasure map scenario trick-or-treating and I'm talking about not the parents' part, but the kids' part, is you could do something special for those who actually come with their treasure map to your house. So if you're giving the bite-sized Kit Kats, you could give a full-size Kit Kat to those kids, or something along those lines, to make it worth their while, or to make it more of a memorable experience. Remember, the whole point of this is for them to have a memorable experience to make a good impression so that, of course, they think, wow, that's a cool church, and they can go from there.
Hey, I got an add-on idea for that one.
Okay.
Okay, so what if, as you came to that, everybody marked off their house that said that the trick-or-treater had been there. They have some little way of doing that. And then the little trick-or-treaters, if they've gone to 10 or more houses, something like that, because you don't want to do too many, right? You don't want to make them go to all the houses.
And depends on, depends on geography.
Then they come back the next Sunday and they bring back their map and their special prizes for that.
Oh, there you are. Hey, way to go. I like it. Okay, so there's some great trick-or-treat options, and you may have more. And let me solicit, if you have more, please let us know for next year's Halloween episode so we can increase our offerings for those who have opportunity.
There we go.
All right, so let's talk about alternatives to trick-or-treating. And this is not just alternatives to trick-or-treating. We sort of lump this in. It's alternative trick-or-treating, but it's alternatives to Halloween in the way we know it. And so we know that a lot of churches that are opposed to Halloween will really get a lot of good or maybe get some ideas out of this section alone. So there's a number of really great ones, and you've probably heard of a bunch of them.
Maybe do them.
And maybe you're doing them. But, you know, the whole Harvest and Fall Festival, rather than a Halloween festival, is pretty common in churches. What's not common in churches, though, is those churches that go all the way with it, and instead of just doing an alternative, they really resurrect, if you will, the old-fashioned real harvest festivals where they have maybe square dancing, they have pie contests, they have maybe have a farmer's market to start it off with. They make a huge deal out of it, and it's all about the harvest, and it happens to be on Halloween. You can expand that in a lot of different ways, but the key thing here is to offer an old-fashioned fall festival that isn't just an alternative. It's really an attraction that people would want to come to, and you can build on this year after year.
Well, another one that's similar is the pumpkin patch, where you might have someone in your congregation or someone who knows somebody who has a pumpkin patch, and you can go out there and fill the evening or the afternoon or whatever that would look like for your folks with stories and hot dogs and s'mores and maybe pumpkin carving or decorating.
Pumpkin pie.
Yeah, you could. You like this one. We could resurrect the Great Pumpkin Story.
You know, and that would be a really fabulous opportunity to maybe at twilight or at dark to somehow resurrect the Great Pumpkin from the Peanuts comic strips, and you know, you just play with that completely. In fact, if you had a really large pumpkin and had some way of, you know, lifting it up, I mean, make a great story for these kids, and what a great experience they might have. And of course, you know, you can also combine it with, if you do a pumpkin patch, I know a lot of churches do fundraisers, they sell pumpkins prior to, well, you can sort of combine that, and, you know, with your leftover pumpkins, and a lot of churches often do from those sales, you could use that to create your pumpkin patch.
For the next year?
Yeah, well, no, not for the next year. I don't think so. Pumpkins don't keep that well. But for that evening, you could, make all sorts of, use your pumpkins for that. So.
Sure. How about one that we did when we were up in Washington, and that's the haunted house. So you could turn your building into a haunted house, and they come in one door and they move through, and you could do it with themes. It doesn't have to necessarily be haunted.
Well, we did before Harry Potter. Was in the movies. He was, of course, in books. Some of you actually remember that. And we had a youth leader who said, let's do a Harry Potter to encourage reading. Actually, it had nothing to do with the movie, to encourage reading and whatnot. And so we did a Harry Potter haunted house, and it wasn't a scary house. It was made for younger folks, but it was a walk through. We had this sort of maze inside our fellowship hall and education wing.
The wing, because we were doing things that weren't so scary with the little children out in the fellowship hall area.
Right. Well, we didn't do anything really scary in the other part. That was a big deal. So anyway, but they could wander through, and all the people were dressed up as characters that looked nothing like the ones when we saw them in the movies down the line. But anyway, so you get the idea. But go ahead.
Well, but I want to add to that and say that you could do it with biblical characters. You've got the dry bones, right? And you could do
that would be zombies.
Right. Okay. So there you are. You've got ghosts. You've got witches that are questioned and whatnot. I mean, there are some
You
really
got-
rich things
Yeah,
to do.
you can go. You can get the John the Baptist head on a platter. I mean, come on, what can be more and straight out of the Bible? So, and of course, you can, if you want to go, you can go this way. You can go into some of the Revelation stuff and so on. So there's lots of things you can do for a haunted house and keep it a biblical theme.
There you go.
So, all right, life-size Candyland is something that we heard about. And I have to say, what a fabulous idea with all the bright colors and actually creating a Candyland board perhaps in your parking lot if you have a big enough parking lot, or around your property. And you can, I don't know how they roll the dice or whatever, but be creative. But what a great opportunity to go from station to station in this giant life-size Candyland.
That is, I just having trouble to picturing that. But one I can picture that I really like are the mazes. You could create a maze. And if you've got maize, i.e. corn, you could create a maze. Again, like they're doing in a number of communities around the country. If you don't have maize, then there are different ways that you could set up a maze that you could have fun with that and moving to the stations where you could find treats of different sorts.
And of course, there's always popular for those churches that have a labyrinth. It's not a maze, but you can still have your goodies in the middle. And and another way of making a maze would be if you are in a hay producing area, you could get a truckload of hay bales and create a maze that way. So that's another opportunity. And of course, another one that we heard about was a Bible character museum, where we're sort of like the wax museum, except they were the live mannequin type things. And so you had to practice and get to, how do you hold still. But, they did from room to room, and again, the whole tour type of thing, where that's an alternative to come and, you may want to combine it by giving away candy or whatever,
Yeah.
but there you are, some alternatives. And of all of them, I have to say, I really like the old-fashioned Harvest Festival. If you've got one coming around Columbia, let me know, because I'd love to come. All right.
You're going to get invitations from some of our pastors, I promise you. Well, let's talk about then some of the combinations. I mean, we've got at least 3 that we can recommend. One is a block party, and that's where you gather all the people that are in your proximity. And when I was pastoring in one congregation, it was actually the last congregation I pastored, and it hit me one day. We were the only, quote, business in a wide neighborhood. There was a school, and there was our church, and there were all of these homes. And I began to realize that we were neighbors to all of our neighbors. And out of that, we put together a block party. And the first year we sponsored it because, to be honest, we didn't know our neighbors. And then after that, we began to meet our neighbors, of course, and our neighbors became part of our planning team. So this block party is a great way to bring people together, have some fun, have some music, and have goodies too.
And one of the top things, and I have to say one thing to commend you about, is that they did invite the neighbors to help with the planning. If your neighbors do the planning or help you with the planning, there will be buy-in. They'll be showing up. And of course, then you can do the trick-or-treating within your block, or they can all do it at wherever the church property or wherever you hold it. And of course, the church can be one of the great hosts. So really a fabulous way of getting into your community. But don't just plan it for your community and then say, y'all come. If you really want buy-in, invite them to be a part of it. Well, another one is, of course, the haunted house meets trick-or-treating.
Right.
And there's not a whole lot to say about that, except for,
Basically, we've been saying.
Yeah, really. So there you are. Okay.
Yeah, or the festival with trick-or-treat booths. Again, it's for those who can't give up trick-or-treating. You've got the festival, and you can be very definite about the trick-or-treating part of it as well. So that's another way to combine these
right. And a lot
efforts.
of kids, parents have to deal with their kids who the parents say, well, we're just not going to do trick-or-treating, and they feel so left out. Well, it's a way of, you can give candy instead of doing the trick-or-treating. You can give away the candy as they do games or as they do hit various stations or whatever. I know that here in Columbia, the University of Missouri puts on a large community kind of indoor trick-or-treating thing, and it really isn't about trick-or-treating, but every booth, every organization has treats for the kids. So for those who don't want to go trick-or-treating, it's a safe environment for them to do it, and the church could do the same thing.
You can tell that you're over 50. Even though I'm slightly over 50, anybody knows that it really is about trick-or-treating.
No, okay, well, there you are. There you are.
But they do. They have games. The different groups at the school have games, and different organizations from around the community are there, and they have all kinds of games and blow-ups that you can walk through in a variety of pieces. Takes up a whole arena.
It does.
Well, but
All right.
here's a big deal though. Halloween isn't just for kids anymore, and
Especially not
it's,
anymore.
right? With the number of children in a way declining that are trick-or-treating, there's the amount of adults that are doing trick-or-treating is growing, or at least wanting to have a good time. So there are some alternatives that you can think about for adults that are within this theme. One is a mystery dinner theater, where you put on a mystery and serve dinner with it.
Well, and you can buy these boxes, these box kits of
Yeah.
mysteries that you can put together with, a minimum amount of characters and a minimum amount of preparation. It's just a matter of getting the information out there, inviting the public. And again, remember that your 25 to 35-year-olds are really engaging in Halloween, and that's a tough nut to crack for a lot of churches. This is the kind of thing that you can get them involved in, is to get them to come to a mystery dinner theater. Now you're going to have to, push the envelope a bit, but you really can have a great time.
Well,
Go ahead.
No, you
Look at
go.
Well, and another one that talk about turning back the clock. This goes back before Harvest Festival. Once upon a time, Halloween was an evening of great balls, masquerade parties. Well, there are churches now and other organizations that are getting on board and doing more formal and less formal masquerade balls and masquerade parties. And it's an incredible opportunity for a church to involve the community, to invite the community, to get some real publicity, because there's probably not a lot of places doing that. And so it's a marketability gold mine there that the church can do if they're willing to invest. Now remember that a good masquerade ball is a ball, and that they tend to be very formal, and they tend to have outlandish, beautiful dresses and costumes and so on. You have to depend on you have to decide on your context. Your context determine what it is that your community can afford or support. But remember that you want to check into your community, not just your church members, because you may have essentially two different communities there. So be checking out beyond yourself.
Okay, well, these next two pieces, we've talked about these already, and to say again, an adult-only fall party or a harvest party or a Halloween party, and also a pumpkin carving, where, you don't really hand children knives to do pumpkin carving. But, with adults, you can do a little bit more with that, gather adults. If you're going to do an adult-only event, though, and you've got possibility of children, you want to be thinking about child care or some care going on. But I say those and get them out of the way, because I really like this next and the last one. House decorating. It's a house decorating
Oh, a house
contest.
decorating contest.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, here's an opportunity. In our community, there's a Christmas decorating contest every year, and it's put on by the city. Well, what would happen if a church sponsored, or a couple of churches sponsored, a home decorating party or house decorating party for their community, and had judging and all the rest, and some sort of prizes. And if you really want to reach these people, don't invite them to come for a worship service. You want to invite them to another kind of service, or another kind of, not so much service, but another kind of event, but that you can invite them to something beyond that. But it also gives your members who show up and are the hosts an opportunity to mingle with these folks, to build relationships, because it's about those relationships, and it's about conversations that you have with people outside the church that make the biggest difference, because those conversations turn into relationships, which turn into spiritual conversations that bring people into the kingdom. So, that's the key here in a house decorating contest, is a way of reaching out beyond the normal group that you typically would reach.
All right. Well, as you just hinted at, you've got to maximize your handoffs. It's not enough just to have fun. I mean, it is, and that's all well and good. And to start to build up spiritual conversations, but the real peace, it comes home with how are you going to turn this into another conversation and another conversation and another conversation. And so we want to talk now about how you maximize your efforts. And the first part of this is you've got to have effective handoffs. And handoffs, that would mean handoffs to events.
One of the things that we so often see is a church will do one of these kind of events, and they may even get contact information. We'll talk about that in a moment. But with that contact information, then they do nothing with it. And they often have the event and somehow expect that by someone coming to this event that they're going to want to show up at your worship service. And I can assure you, in general, that's not the case. They're more likely to come to something else you offer if you offer something that is going to be targeted towards them for a next event, a what happens next. For instance, if you've done something with kids, if you focused on the trick-or-treating aspect, or you've
with
done
children.
With children, right? And you, I hope that's who's trick-or-treating. But anyway, if you're focusing on kids, then what you want to invite people to is to a kids and or family event that follows this Halloween thing. So you may have a carnival for the kids, or you may want to push something for Christmas, although that's a long ways away.
Yeah, you want to try to be hitting Thanksgiving,
or even
I don't
sooner.
know, family.
Yeah,
well,
something that 2 or 3 weeks, something that's especially for the kids. Again, a carnival or something movie afternoon or whatever. So again, yes, great stuff. So that if you're aiming at kids, that's what you want. Now, if you're aiming at families, if you've done like a harvest festival, which is a family event, then your next opportunity, the handoff, needs to be something that is for families. It's geared towards families specifically. So you may do a parenting thing. You may do a family retreat. Yeah, maybe. There's a number of family events that you could put on that you could specifically invite your family to.
Yeah, when you say you could put on, I'm thinking, wow, they could be overwhelmed because a lot of energy is going to be going into this. But look in your community and see what might be going on that you can maximize or build upon. I know when we lived in Atlanta, the Fernbank Science Center was forever doing special Saturday afternoon pieces, and so often we would take our youth or children or prepare or plan for family outings where all families could go together, and we would go and do that together, and there'd be some gathering time and some ending time. So you build off what is going on. Give people a chance to come together and have fun again.
Right. So there you are. Okay.
All right.
Now, if you've targeted adults, then you want to, of course, target your next handoff as some sort of an adult theme, or adult event.
Now, however you're going to be advertising this handoff, it can't be cheesy. It's got to be 5-star, A1, look good, and be creative. You look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, this is not the time to do half sheets of paper run off your mimeograph machine or even your photocopier. This is the time for doing cardstock, doing glossy, doing 4-color, Vistaprint.
Yeah.
Okay, magnets or whatever. Something that is a real effective handoff. Now, it doesn't just have to be something in paper. There's a lot of different ways you could do it, especially with the candy stuff. You could do wrappers around candy.
You make fortune cookie candy.
There you are, whatever. So, be thinking, how do we advertise this handoff for this group?
Okay, but it's not enough just to have handoffs. You've also got to get contact information. This is the great opportunity to get information and to build your e-lists and maybe your mailing list. So have door prizes with what you do. Have people sign up.
And if you're going to do door prizes, you need to gauge the worth of the prize based on how many names you really want. So if you're getting you get a grab bag out of three things of candy or whatever, a bucket of candy, then you can expect to get some names. On the other hand, if you're giving away an iPad, you're likely to get a lot of names, and in fact, you might actually have a whole lot of folks show up just for that, which may or may not where you want to go. But you need to weigh up what would it be worth to get 100 family names that are possible contacts for you. What would that be worth? Put a number on it And that's the prize, the level of prize you want to get people to sign up for these door prize or door prizes. And a lot of organizations still will do donations for a church. But either way, you want to make sure you're getting this contact information. Another way of getting that, of course, is
if you've got children, you need to register them, and parents expect that. It won't be any surprise. And whatever you do, you've got contact information, you've got what's coming up. Now you got to follow up, and follow up is not just about advertising. The next piece. Remember, people want to know that they're significant, that they make a difference, that they're noticed, and so this isn't really just about you. In fact, in the end, it isn't about you at all. It's about them and about their relationship with God and Jesus and the church. And so we've got to do follow-up. And follow-up, take pictures and send pictures.
If you've got kids, that's a great way of doing it with registration. Get yourself a good digital camera and get them posed in costumes or looking through cutouts or carving their pumpkins or whatever. But make sure, of course, with picture one, we know who that is so that we can get the picture to them. And then get them printed and get them sent to them. Now you can do that a number of different ways, but what a wonderful way if you get a standard, 4x6, whatever, stick it in an envelope with a handwritten thank you note for attending your event with a reminder of the upcoming event that you're inviting them to, and send that with a first-class stamp to these folks. What an awesome opportunity and follow-up. And of course, you want to put them in your mailing list. And if you're doing an e-list, you want to do that with this caveat. You may want to, depending on how seriously to take the ICANN regulations and spam, you may want to say, ask, do you want to be added to our newsletter list?
You might. Okay, one other little piece with all of this is that when you send a thank you note, make sure that it is handwritten. And if someone on your team or somebody within your leadership had conversation with people, you want them to send a note in addition to a general. note. You want them to say, it was good to get to meet you. It was good to have a conversation. And so you might want to do a little bit of role playing even before your event with people with your greeters, with your leadership, to how to have some of these conversations and to make quick notes so that they'll be able to follow up. Well, here's a final piece, because we are out of time, and that is, whatever you do, try not to sell anything. Figure out how to underwrite this. You might have to charge admission, but if you can get away with it, please do. The church has a horrendous reputation about always having our hands out, and we have got to end that reputation and prove people wrong. But if we're going to prove them wrong, they got to be wrong. All
right. Well, we are out of time, but we want to mention one last thing, and that is, beginning this week, this Thursday, you can tune into YouTube. You can subscribe to Church Tips, 2 to 3 minute video segments that have a single tip to help you and your congregation reach your community. Hey, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week.